I think that we're kind of like at this sort of, phase where like, we kind of like conquered this mountain, so to speak, of like getting companies comfortable with using freelancers. And that was the big idea. Like 10 years from now, like there's going to be more freelancers than full-time employees. And we want to get people excited about hiring freelancers. And I think like the next phase of it is, how do we sort of augment freelancers with AI agents and almost like build out a marketplace around that idea, whether it is augmenting the freelancers and giving them 10x, 100x more leverage to work with more clients with keeping their cost structure roughly the same, or even, starting almost like a separate marketplace of AI agents that are trained by our freelancers that you can hire and you can review, and they're very good at certain tasks and you pay per task. So I think it's very exciting.
How are marketplaces for legal work transforming the way that we work and the way that we live? Creating opportunities for a better match between what you need from work and the work that you do, and giving companies more flexibility as they think about talent. Today, we are joined on the Abstract here in New York by my friends Raad and Ashish, known them for a long time, and they are the co-founders of Lawtrades. Raad and Ashish started Lawtrades together in 2015. They've gone through 500 startups together, raised $9.7 million in venture backing, and they've grown the business to a sustainable, which we're going to talk about, $12 million in ARR. As we'll discuss also, their journey from law school to founders to profitability hasn't always been easy. Guys, thanks so much for joining me here today in New York for this episode of the podcast.
Nice. Thanks for having us, Tyler. Super pumped to have this conversation.
Yeah, same. Thanks for having us, Tyler.
Cool. Okay, let's go back to maybe sort of the beginning. Both of you are actually lawyers by training. It's not the most common background for founders. I want to ask each of you to begin with, why'd you go to law school?
My parents made me. No. I went to law school because when I was an undergrad, I was originally a chemistry major. And the original path that I was supposed to take was to become a pharmacist. That was the.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah. That was the thing. That was the hot thing then. My dad was all about that, and making a comfortable 100K salary, being a pharmacist, working at CVS, going to St. John's for that, and then I realized I did not like the idea of being a pharmacist, so I just kind of took some courses in undergrad around like legal studies, philosophy of law, and just realized I like reading, analyzing, kind of seeing how the pieces of the law fit together to kind of like keep society running and functioning. And then I was like, all right, like maybe I'll lean a little bit more to that, and applied to a couple of law schools and got in, and the rest was history. But at the time, I was not thinking about doing a tech company or anything like that. It was kind of like, let me just be a lawyer and kind of make roughly the same salary that I thought I would make as a pharmacist, which turned out to be not true. And it was a pretty terrible job market when I got out, which kind of prompted the idea for Lawtrades. But yeah, to please my parents and make them happy, like a typical first generation brown dude. What about you, Ash? What was the?
Yeah, I mean, similarly, I started St. John's studying political science and government. Originally, I wanted to do something in public service. So like I thought that was going to be my path.
You and me both.
Yeah, I wanted to do that. And I also was interested in business at the time too. And I thought law school was an easy way to kind of test the waters with both. It's like, you could either practice law and go into public service, or you could practice law and go into business. So it really gave me the optionality that I was looking for at that time, because I was still pretty unsure of like what I actually wanted to do.
You both mentioned St. John's. Is that how you guys got connected? And where did the idea for Lawtrades come from?
Yeah, so we met many years before Lawtrades became a thing or an idea. So we both went to undergrad together at St. John's. We joined the same fraternity. I had the great pleasure of pledging Ashish. Took a lot of joy in that, and he crossed, and we were in the same fraternity, and we weren't like particularly like super close. I want to say we were in the same circle, but we weren't like hanging out like every single day and like best friends or anything like that. Like we were cool with each other. But I think like, at least for me, the fraternity, like I think in many ways like set up for a lot of like very sort of loosely related business practices that is employed today. Like, how do you get people excited? How do you rally the troops? How do you make the frat money and make it profitable and be able to reinvest that profits back into doing other cool stuff and just growing it? And I think like you had like similar ambitions with the fraternity, and we might have like toyed around with the idea of doing something together.
Yeah,
but
the fraternity we were in was small enough where like you knew everyone and you knew their story and you were connected with them even if they were a few years apart. But yeah, it was really like the bedrock for establishing trust and just getting the relationship going up until, the idea of Lawtrades came about.
And what were the early days like? Like, was there an inflection point where you decided, okay, the two of us are going to go all in on this? Did that just sort of happen naturally over time? Like, how did it go from idea to like, we're going to pursue this thing?
So we knew each other from undergrad. We ended up going to two different law schools. We kind of just stayed in touch. During my second year of law school, I launched like the first sort of internet thing, and it was one of the first apps on the Facebook App Store when it existed. It doesn't exist anymore. But it was a simple web app that essentially allowed people to customize their cover photo image. So a couple of months before Facebook was going to announce this big like cover photo, your Facebook profile redesign that just had this banner image that anyone could customize. So that was like the big sort of like, it was a big deal at the time because, when you look at like MySpace, if people sort of remember that, it was all about customizing your.
My parents wouldn't let me have a MySpace account. But yes,
your hidden one, your anonymous MySpace account. It was all about customization. Facebook was sort of the opposite. Everything was very much like cookie cutter, like how it was designed. So I thought it would be a good idea to come up with like an app that just allowed you to customize that cover photo banner image. So you just go onto a website. It's called myfbcoverphoto.com. Browse through thousands of different cover photos, like Justin Bieber photos, inspirational quotes, and you click a button, and it would automatically resize it and change it for you on your profile. So that somehow grew to about 30 million hits a month, and I ran some banner ads through Google Ads on it and turned it into like a six-figure business while I was in law school. And I thought that was pretty cool, and I think that might have like piqued your interest a little bit around that time. Just like, hey, that like, what are you doing? And and I was kind of at that point pretty checked out from law school. Like I went through 1L, that was fine, and then the second year just felt a little repetitive. And then by the time I was finishing up my second year, I was like, all right, I'm ready to do something else. Like I've kind of like conquered that or about to conquer it, but like what other sort of big thing could I sort of work on? So that did well, and then around that time, I think we started sort of talking a little bit more, and the site did well, the app did well, but it also fizzled out. Like I didn't treat it like a real company or real business, so I didn't like. There's all these copycats that came out. They like outranked me on SEO and just kind of like went from like making a bunch of money to like slowly sort of dying and dwindling away. But at the time, I was like, all right, I want to work on something bigger. How could I still like use my education from law school? From whatever insights I had, like working, very briefly at like a few law firms and different sort of public service organizations, and I was just like, okay, there has to be a better model that we can sort of build that can make legal services a little bit more affordable, a little bit more accessible, and then towards the end, I think you were 1 year below me, and I was like 1 year ahead.
Yeah, 1 or 2, something like that. I just remember you. For me, I basically remember. I was finishing my 1L year internship, and it was at the Attorney General's office in Connecticut. Okay. And I was just like super frustrated halfway through it because I was just like, this is moving really slow, and I don't feel particularly useful here. I'm not adding much value, and I just like wasn't excited about the longer term career prospects that I had thought, going into law school. But at the same time, I was interested in business. Like I worked at a really fast-growing small business while I was in undergrad and law school doing sales. And I remember coming home from that internship one day and going onto Facebook. That's how far back this was. And seeing Raad's post on Facebook and it was just like a teaser for Lawtrades, and it just said like legal reimagined or something like that, and it was a sick backdrop of like the New York City skyline, and I was just like, all right, I got to message him right now, find out what this is about, because I wanted to do something a little riskier too, and I was like, all right, well, let me hear more about this, and if I could add value, like I could just ping Raad and see if we could work together on this.
And I had no idea at that time like what exactly I was doing. I was just like, I just bought the domain name, built a really cool, really quick landing page, and I was like, use the New York City skyline, come up with, a one-liner copy and a simple way to enter your email address. And I was like, let me just put that out there and then kind of figure it out. And I think it's one of the reasons I love the internet is you can just kind of put stuff out there, and that sort of,
and back then,
sparked the interest from my co-founder.
Yeah, and back then, that's a big step, right? Like, of course you always think about doing something in entrepreneurship, but like, taking the leap and buying the domain name and putting it out there and saying, hey, this is like something I'm going to try, almost de-risked it in a lot of ways for me, because I was like, all right, well, this is a good idea. Here's someone I trust. So, let me reach out and see what we could do here.
I know the two of you went through 500 startups together. Was that pretty early in the Lawtrades journey? And I'm also just curious generally, like, what was your experience like with something like that? Because you talk to folks who are like, you got to do something like 500 startups or YC or some accelerator. And then other people are like, but you have to give up so much often when you go through. So I'm just curious for your experience with that.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I thought it was a net positive for us. So in the early days of Lawtrades, we were pretty much bootstrapped, and we were more or less profitable from day one. We didn't really have a product, but we charged a subscription for lawyers to join, and we were kind of broadly doing all sorts of legal services. And the main core idea was, how do we connect people to lawyers in a more efficient way? And we kind of tinkered with that idea for a bit, made a little bit of money. Eventually we sort of narrowed in on businesses, small businesses at the time, different than what we're doing right now. And it just grew even more. I think one of the reasons it grew even more was because the needs of a business owner is a lot more predictable than somebody getting hit by a car and looking for a personal injury lawyer, or like filing for a divorce or something like that. So when we narrowed it down, we saw a decent amount of growth, and I think that's what sparked the interest of 500. And I remember we got rejected by them though.
Yeah,
I don't think we got in at like the first or second try.
This was we started experimenting with Lawtrades around like 2014, and we had gotten in the fall of like 2015. So it was maybe a year and a half in, and I think before that we had got rejected from 500, and then we were working on this co-working space right here in New York called Alley NYC. This was an awesome co-working space back in the day.
Like an underground tech movement.
Yeah,
in
like
Silicon Alley.
Silicon Alley.
People called it that.
That's what it was.
Literally on like 37th and 7th, like just a cool place, and it would just give us so much energy, being there and working there all the time. And there were a few folks from 500 that were portfolio companies that were working in that same office. So as we started getting more traction, we were like, all right, well, it doesn't hurt to apply again. And then, they let us in that time period, and it was just an incredible experience.
We didn't have we didn't have a ton of growth, I think, when or a ton of clarity of like how we were going to attack the market and go to market and all that first time around. But I think the second time around, what really helped was like getting more intros from some of the founders at Alley that were already part of 500. And that was, I think, like a lesson around just like how important like building connections and like cold, which you're really good at. You're way better at like cold emailing people and just like getting that off the ground than me, which is why you kind of are like really good at the sales side of things. But yeah, I remember we just hustled. We got rejected and we were like, oh crap, that sucks. Like, let's try again. But this time, let's get like 5, 6, 7. Like we had a bunch of people like write in on behalf of us after we applied, where like they almost like it would, they almost couldn't say no. We were just so annoying. We were just like, we wouldn't stop. We were relentless in that way. And then finally got the call, right?
Yep. Yeah. It was incredible. It was the first time that like someone in the broader tech industry took a bet on us, and we ended up just moving out to Mountain View for like maybe a year or so, and just living in the house, working all day, all night.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like a 4-month program, but you end up staying there a little longer to work on raising money, and
But I think that was like it's such a huge inflection point, because this is also like pretty far back, right? Like I feel like startups and accelerators, they're pretty mainstream right now. At the time, it was still sort of like a very novel idea, new concept. We didn't apply to YC because there was another company at the time that was also a legal tech company that was doing like a sort of a connecting service, but for consumers at the time. So we're just like, oh, well, they're automatically going to reject us. So like, why even apply to that? And I think some part of us were just like, like we're not like smart enough for YC or something, you know? Like, but like, not maybe like we're not smart enough. They just seemed very technical.
Yeah.
And our vibe was like more like we were like hustlers. We were grinders. We were like, you know, like the way that we grew Lawtrades in the early days, we would go door to door, knocking on different law firms and like have a square reader out and a presentation and be like, here's why you should join our network. And I feel like that vibe just resonated a lot more with 500 at the time than YC. And YC is obviously great. And there was another one called AngelPad that another competitor did. So it's kind of like, well, 500 didn't do a legal tech investment yet. So like, we'll have a greater shot at getting in there. And then I remember we got like the 100K or 125K check, and that was like the biggest deal ever. Like I've never
so hyped
in my life seen that much money like hit my bank account or the business bank account. And it was just like, and it was like you said, it was incredibly validating, but it was also just kind of like, whoa, like there's random people out there that believe in us so much to actually write us that big of a check. And I think that just like was super motivating for the next couple of years.
Yeah, we were, you know, it was such a big break. And the funny thing is about all this is there's this one accelerator in New York that I'm not going to name, but we were so desperate at this time because we were running on fumes, and you know, luckily our overhead was low, right? Our personal overhead was low, so it allowed us to take more risks. But there was like this one accelerator where we made like a music video for us to try getting into. Because we were like,
as part of our application.
Do you still have this? And can we include it in the show notes?
Honestly, that accelerator probably does, and I think they're just like waiting until like maybe we go public and they're just gonna release it, and then our stock will just get shorted like crazy once it gets released. But I don't know. I don't know what. We were just like, we just want to stand out, and we literally one weekend went to Ali and like lip synced a music video as to why we should get in, and sent them.
We made a rap over Nicki Minaj's Anaconda song. I don't know if you remember that song.
Oh, amazing!
And the entire rap was like on that beat, and it was all about like what Lawtrades does and like why this accelerator should invest in us. And then, like we never
heard from them ever. And I think they just like blocked us.
Yeah,
and,
they're
like,
probably.
I'm gonna tell your team about this, and they're gonna make you sing this at the company holiday party next year.
Yeah, exactly. It's gonna come out at some point.
If that video comes out.
It's gonna at some point it'll hopefully come out. But yeah, it was overall though 500 was an incredible experience. I mean, they've been great partners for us, and when we made this switch to start working with legal departments, 500 was one of the first companies to use us. So they started, you know, telling other legal teams.
They're super helpful.
Yeah.
They invested in our Series A. We still have connections to a lot of the folks that were still there.
Yeah. Their current general counsel, Brenda, who is awesome, was a freelancer on Lawtrades, and then they eventually hired her directly. Yeah,
that's pretty
after
cool.
working with her. So
so she started as a freelancer, and then became the GC.
Yeah, she became the GC
and then switched
after
over as
years.
a client.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And then now uses Lawtrades to like hire a bunch of people herself.
Yeah.
When you were, say, pivoting the sort of business model to what you have today, which is matching fractional talent. I mean, sometimes people are full-time, but most of the time sort of like fractional talent with legal departments who have a need. What was harder, the demand side of that, right? Like getting the legal teams to sign up, or the supply side, like finding the right people out there or growing that sort of network that's on the platform? Or did they both sort of like just perfectly grow in tandem?
Oh, it's always perfect.
Yeah.
You want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, I thought I think both were equally as hard, to be honest, because making that pivot really required us to like rebuild the supply side from the ground up.
So this is the third pivot, just to be clear. So we started off originally like, we'll help you find a personal injury lawyer, divorce lawyer, whatever. Then we were like, you know, if you're a early stage startup or small business, we'll help you find a small business lawyer. And then now the third pivot is like, actually this is really useful for legal departments. Corporate legal. They have, you know, bigger budgets, better LTV, better CAC, you know, more longevity on the platform. So we had to then like kind of differentiate the supply side. So I think that's what you're probably referring to, where we had to keep like reshuffling the base. And I think that like made it somewhat tricky. But I think that once we landed on the current model that's kind of focused on mid-market enterprise companies selling to legal departments, then everything kind of clicked because we had that clarity. Whereas before, it was just sort of like we just were 1 foot in, 1 foot out, wasn't really sure. But I mean, at least for me, from my perspective, I think it's always easier to get the supply side once you have the demand side down, because the value proposition to somebody that is a freelancer looking to join is very compelling. Like, hey, do you want to create a free profile and potentially make 6 figures for free with no addition? You know, like who's gonna really say no to that, right? So I've always viewed it as like a demand-led business. I know a lot of other companies can be different. Whether you know, like Uber Eats, you probably need like a decent amount of like couriers and delivery people to sort of launch into restaurants. But for us, it's like we'll get the demand, and then because the work is remote in nature, it's fairly easy for us to like find the supply side, onboard them, do it all digitally, and like within the same day get them to like start logging their work like from like an hour from when they create a profile. So I don't know. That's how I'd kind of view it.
I mean, this isn't really like gig work because it's I think a little more white collar, and what you've set up is longer term engagements, right? We're not talking usually about like an hour or two here or there. It's a sort of someone comes in and serves as a part-time product counsel to a business for 6 months while someone else is out on maternity or paternity leave. Or, but I'm curious sort of for your thoughts. Like, do you think this is really good for workers, right? If companies use this, and I want to talk about that too, like, if companies start to use marketplaces like this more and more and more, and maybe like view their structure of their legal team differently than they were able to 10 years ago, 15 years ago, is this a good thing for workers, do you think?
I'd like to think it is.
Yeah.
Or I might be a little bit biased there. I might be a little bit biased, but like, I mean, look, the way I view it is like what we're building is kind of the evolution of the gig economy, right?
Yeah.
So the gig economy started with like, finding someone on TaskRabbit to like, build your IKEA shelf, for like getting a ride from point A to point B. But I think the next sort of like revolution that combines like the internet, marketplace platforms, AI, whatever, is really disrupting these large institutional professional services verticals. So whether that's legal, finance, accounting, management consult, the McKinseys, the Coolies, they're all going to get at some point disrupted by this model, because it's very appealing for workers, right? You get to, create a profile, set your own hours, say how much you want to work or how little you want to work, make as much money as you want or as little money as you want, push a button, go on snooze, go on vacation, come back, have like more work lined up. So it's like insanely flexible around the way I think like people in the future and people currently would view work, instead of this very sort of like, I'm a W-2, I'm going to be at this company for 10 plus years doing the same thing and kind of, maybe retire early. But like with Lawtrades, like you get to like experiment with like different clients, different industries, different skill sets, and it's just kind of viewed differently, right? Like I feel like maybe a couple of years ago, switching jobs every like 2 years would like kind of be looked down upon, whereas like on Lawtrades, like you can like work with like several clients or several engagements at the same time, and some of them maybe last 6 months, some of them last like 2 years, some of them could be a 1 month project, but you gather that skill set and you're at the frontier of the nature of work as it's evolving today, not like just kind of like being siloed and kind of doing the same thing. So I think that it just like levels up people and gives you that broad-based experience, and like we're at the front lines of like knowing like what GCs actually want and actually need, and what tools, whether that's learning how to be really good at AI prompting, or learning how to use the newest best CLM, or like being able to negotiate, whatever it is. Like we have a lot of really good data on that, and I think like upskilling and doing all that is a large component to it. So like it was something that I would have wanted when I graduated law school, and I think that was the original kind of, to come back to like the beginning of the story. Like I wanted to graduate law school and travel and work remotely and still make like a decent amount of money, but like not do it from like the confines of a law firm in New York City, at a desk job. And I was just kind of like, well, like all this work is like transmitted over email and digitally anyway. Like why do I physically need to be at this place and clock in from like 9 to 5? And it's like that's just not how like knowledge workers really work, right? It's I forgot like there was like the Naval, comparison to how like knowledge workers work, which is like kind of, he makes like comparison to like a lion, where like you sort of go through these bursts of energy where you just work a lot and then you like rest, and then you like, you go full stream ahead and you just work like crazy and then you kind of stop. And I think Mr. Beast has a similar sort of theory as well to how he works. He just goes crazy for like 2 or 3 days and then he just kind of like sleeps for like 2 days. And I think that's just how like knowledge workers and creative people like really get their best work done. It's not just like clocking in every day 9 to 5 doing the same thing. And I think the world is just like moving closer and closer to this, like, like the famous Elon quote, like, what did you get done, last week? And it's like, it's all like output focus. And that's really what we kind of like focus on, is just like, what value are you really delivering? Like, who cares about the hourly rate? Who cares about, 2,000 minimum billable hours, or like whether you were in the office on nights and weekends? Like, did you get the job done? And I think that we're doing a good job of kind of like crafting the platform to be like outcome focused rather than just sort of like, I put in the hours.
Right. I am curious about the talent pool that you have. One of the interesting, I don't know if this is still the case, but I think I saw at one point a sort of stat that more than 50% of the people in the talent pool are women. I guess like any sort of surprising or interesting things that you've learned about the makeup of people who are on Lawtrades?
Yeah, now I think it's closer to 60%.
Wow.
I think that there's a lot of folks who necessarily don't want to work at law firms, or maybe they're burned out at bigger law firms. Perhaps they don't want to be a partner, or maybe they don't want to work in-house for their entire career, right? And, they end up coming to Lawtrades as almost that like third path where like they can test the waters and be entrepreneurial. They could use us as a, sort of in-between state in their career where they try us out and maybe they go back in-house later on. But yeah, most of the folks that are on the platform are incredibly entrepreneurial. They are using us as a way to just kind of explore the waters of going independent. I would say one of the surprising things, though, is just really seeing how the changes in the like macro environment really impact like the amount of people that sign up on the platform. So like, if you look back just recently, like during COVID, we experienced such a huge demand in both client and talent, right? Because a lot of folks were laid off or, wanted to work remotely. Just recently with like all the tech layoffs, right? Like many folks, especially that worked in legal, were laid off, right? And need that, alternative option, right? Or maybe they were just fed up of working at, some of these overfunded companies that just weren't a good bet for them in the first place. So yeah, it's been interesting to see how that dynamic kind of changes the marketplace.
Yeah, and I would say like I think one thing we do really well is we remove the barrier of entry to work at really good companies, in the sense that, the traditional path and the existing path is like, to get a really great job, you need to go to a top 14 law school and be top 5% in your class and have an uncle that's a partner at Skadden to, to sort of get you in. And it's like with Lawtrades, like we remove all of that, right? You create a profile, you do great work, like you're going to be rewarded. You collect reviews. You're able to really like show what you can do, and that's why we have way more minorities on our platform than any of the big law firms, way more women on our platform than any other legal platform and law firm. And it's because we're sort of like removing that barrier to entry and just kind of focus on like good work. And I think people appreciate that, and you just get more diversity. Like you don't need to like go really out of your way. It's not like we kind of went out there and just like we want our platform to be diverse or we want more women. It just kind of naturally happened because the platform just democratizes really great opportunities, and I think that's a net positive for society.
Yeah, and I hadn't really thought about it before. We're talking about it now, but maybe you're a big time GC and you decide, okay, I don't want to be doing a full-time job, so I'm going to go out and sort of hang my own shingle, and I have 4 clients already, and like you can make ends meet that way. But for a lot of folks, the sort of like administrative burden of doing that, or having to have a reputation or a network, I mean, like you provide all of that actually like built in, basically.
Payments, insurance, time tracking, like all the administrative things that would normally cost you thousands of dollars maybe a decade ago are basically given to them for free, to join the platform. And it's true. It really makes it much easier to just, give it a try.
It's very much de-risk. And it's kind of, the way I look at it, it's kind of similar to what like Shopify has done for e-commerce sellers, we're essentially doing that for white-collar professionals. Give you everything you need to deliver legal services digitally online. And what does that do? That dramatically reduces the cost of legal services because you don't have, partners in the middle making millions of dollars. You don't have a fancy office in Park Avenue.
Right.
It's just like it's you, the person that we're connecting to, and like all the software needed to give you the same infrastructure of a law firm, but like it's all software enabled and it's all basically given for free. So, it's not really rocket science. I don't think we're particularly like insanely smart people. We're just sort of like, why does legal services cost so much? And it's like
someone has to pay for the horse paintings on the wall.
Yeah,
they're really nice.
Yeah. We might have NFT horse paintings, but
yeah. And clients found it super valuable. Like they trusted us very early on and took a bet. And if you find one really good lawyer or paralegal on Lawtrades, it makes it much easier to hire a whole team around the platform.
I want to ask you both about a sort of another inflection point in your business, which I think you've been very open about. You post about this a lot, Raad, on LinkedIn and on YouTube, and I find it super interesting. And it mirrors a sort of change in how investors have been thinking about the companies that they want to invest in, or what valuations should be, or how companies should be pursuing sort of like burn versus profitability. In 2013, you made a pretty, significant shift in course, and I think you laid off some folks and decided that you had to, because your monthly burn was just too much and you were going to be flat year over year on revenue. You didn't see a path to profitability. Like, you needed to sort of really change course and make that the priority. Tell us about how you reached that conclusion, like why not just go out and raise more money, or and why you're really happy with where the business is today, even if it was not necessarily like a super easy path to get there.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of PTSD, I would say. That's a good sort of starting point. I think when you're in business for a while, you kind of come to this realization that nobody's coming to save you, and you really truly are out on your own. Nobody's really coming to save you, especially when you're in a down market and the economy is down and you're in a bad macro cycle. And we've gone through, two or three of those already. Aside from even the pivots with, COVID ended up being really good for us, but in the beginning, like every company sort of like stopped operations and shut down, and we had to pause our salaries and kind of figure out like where we were going to go. But because we were able to survive that, we're still here today. And similarly, during the SVB collapse, like after the sort of like tech bubble burst, there was we ended up raising a round right before that. That was our last round, our Series A. But we again entered a really bad cycle, and I think sort of just a takeaway for us, and probably to anyone else that's like running a company, is your costs are really the only thing that truly matter at the end of the day, and your profits that are coming in. And it's very simple, and it's kind of it's a little crazy that more people don't talk about that, or more people don't share about that. It's usually just sort of like, you raise a big round, you do a press piece on it, everyone kind of pats you on the back, but no one really kind of talks about like the business fundamentals anymore. And we tried the high growth route. We did the VC, we're VC backed, but for us, I think part of the journey of starting a company is like what comes really naturally to you, and like what are you really good at. And for us, it's always been frugality, hustling, grinding, and that ultimately led to us having our first profitable year this year, and growing with like half the team size that we had just over a year ago. So obviously layoffs and all that sucks, and I don't think anyone wants to go through that, or wants that repeated, but it had to be done, right? It's a tough sort of thing. I think that. It was either that or the company goes under. So like, we had to make that hard decision, but we did that, and we're kind of on this sustainable path now. And I think everything is just like laser sharp focused in, from everyone that we hire to like, every contractor we hire to every software expense. Like I literally have meetings with our head of ops like every 2 weeks. We just open up a spreadsheet, we list out every single expense in the company, and we go line by line. I'm like, do we actually need this or do we not? and we just eliminate, and that's a totally different frame of thinking and frame of operating compared to like, all right, like when are we raising our next round and how much are we raising and like are we going to grow 300-400%, and that's fine, and there's companies that do that and they thrive and there's clearly validation for that. You look at Meta, Amazon, and all that. But for us, that just wasn't our thing, and we're trying to build something for the long term. We're trying to build a generational company. If we were to shut down, that would be really bad for a lot of workers on the platform that would not be able to rely on us anymore as a source of income. So we take that, to heart and just optimize for that. It was just a choice. So I don't know if.
Yeah, it was such a mindset change, and it wasn't even like the layoffs were tough, but we had a small team, so it wasn't as if we laid off like dozens and dozens of people or anything like that.
Yeah.
But the real change was, getting buy-in across the entire company, across our investors, across our, supply side as well, right? And really letting them know that, hey, there's a sort of change in the company and how we want to run it. And, I think the best part about it is just like being able to have that optionality, right? A lot of times with like the traditional VC growth route, right, it really excludes the amount of options you have. It's either like go public or, deal with or get a massive acquisition. And anything below that is like really not, considered a successful outcome, right? And for us, this path we're on just feels like just so much more authentic to us, and and it benefits everyone.
Can you talk to me? You talked about communicating this to both sort of like your team and getting the team really aligned around this new vision, and then also your investors, right? And it's no surprise, like lots of VCs want, 100x, 1000x, whatever x exits. Yeah. I'm just curious to hear more about both of those. Like, how did you go about getting the team to really buy in, and how did you go about getting your investors to say, like, yeah, we think this is right for Lawtrades?
Yeah, I'll go on the team. The team was, I feel like, received it really well. I think it's probably a sigh of relief for them in a lot of ways, right? Because in 2023, every day you would see another company laying off 20 or 30 or 50% of their staff. And, we all knew friends that were impacted, right, and laid off and stuff. So I think our employees and our team, took it with a lot of excitement that like, hey, we're going to focus on being profitable and being sustainable and be here for the long term.
And it's something within their control, right? If you're an employee and it's like, hey, like for us to get profitable, we need to hit X number in revenue, clients, whatever it basically is. And like they can see that. That's very different than just kind of like, trust me, bro, I'm going to raise a Series B. It'll happen. You just it'll happen eventually. We'll do it. There's not that much control they have over that outcome. I mean, they would have to obviously really trust the founders, and I think that they do trust us. But like, I couldn't guarantee there was going to be like another fundraise at like a higher valuation than what we raised at. Like, that just wasn't guaranteed. But I could, we could all work our asses off and generate 12 million in revenue in a year with like half the team size and like half the marketing spend, because we were just like hyper focused on that. And for the investors, I think it's really important to get really good long-term minded investors as well. I thought that was like really helpful for us. Like we had Tim Draper on our cap table from Draper Associates. We have AngelList and a bunch of other really great like VCs that I called them. They spoke to we spoke, and they were very supportive, right? I don't think anybody really wants to, even if you're a VC and you want 1,000x return, you also don't want like the team to quit and just have your investment go to zero, right? So I think the not so savvy investors will kind of be like, like why don't you raise another round? Because I don't blame them. Like they're kind of conditioned to view success as like if a company's continuously raising every year, they're on a good track. If a company isn't, then something is wrong. But like if you do look under the hood and you look at the revenue is growing, if the margins are expanding, if the customer base is growing, like those are the things that actually matter. Like whether you're out there in the market fundraising or not, like that's like a, I don't know, that's like a
The cherry on top. That's like the
That's like a cherry on top.
The TechCrunch piece is great,
Yeah.
but the TechCrunch piece is probably not gonna like make your business worth
exactly.
something.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Or make it be around next year.
It's a good ego boost for sure to get on TechCrunch, and we did that. We were on TechCrunch. We were on all the tech publications when we did our Series A, and it felt good. But then it's like, the reality sort of set in. Like, no matter how much money you raise, if you go through a bad cycle, you're going to go through a bad cycle. Like sometimes no amount of money is really going to change that. So like I think like it's good to just be very cautious about that and just be very transparent with your investors. So I write a lot on LinkedIn, but one thing I always do is send out investor updates. I used to do it every month. Now I do it every quarter. So like I haven't missed one in like I don't know how many years now, but I'm very open. I'm very transparent about it. Whether our numbers are up, down, sideways, like they're all getting it. And I think that when you go quiet and you don't really send those updates, then the context of these conversations that you're inevitably gonna have once you go silent can be not so great. But like there should be no surprises, right? And the really good investors know that. A company just isn't a linear path. Like there are multiple pivots, there are multiple sort of dead ends. It's like a video game. Like sometimes you beat the level, sometimes you die, sometimes you try again, you sort of level up. And we're lucky to have all the major investors be very supportive about that. So I'm super grateful for that.
I mean, I think of you two as co-founders who are like pretty. I don't know if you're in lockstep all the time, right? Obviously, but like you get along really well. You support each other well. You mentioned sort of like PTSD as a part of this experience, and I've also seen some YouTube videos you've done about like managing the stress of being a founder. And I'm just curious, going through a really big sort of pivot like that, how the two of you manage that experience personally, and if there are sort of broader lessons that you'd want to share with the listeners about. Managing through really stressful times in a business and how you come out the other side.
Yeah. I'll say one thing, then I'll pass it off to you for the details. We have one rule, which is like we both can't be depressed at the same time. So no matter
so
what,
true, yeah.
whoever,
So true.
whoever kind of is depressed, like, and they kind of call that out, the other party can't be like sucked into that. Like even if you have to fake it, you have to just like, you have to be the optimistic one. Yeah. So we get that sort of natural, downside, whatever, when we need it, but the other side has to, I don't know, fake it sometimes.
Yeah,
I guess,
no, it's
right?
true.
Like
I mean,
fake optimism.
Yeah, we do a good job at supporting each other when we know, that maybe there's some level of self-doubt that one might be feeling, or feeling down about whatever issue you're dealing with at the company. So that's been important, and we've always still. No matter all the different pivots and the different cycles that we've been through, we've always kind of kept the same routines as well, right? Like we meet up regularly. We work in the office together every single day. We grab coffee at the same time every single morning. We hang out when we're not working as well. So, I think when you just have that trust with your business partner, your co-founder, it just helps you survive the droughts much better. You know what I mean? And
it's just showing up. It's like going to the gym, right? If you're trying to get jacked, right? You show up even on the days you're hungover and you're tired and you're sleepy and you have the worst or a sleep score. Like you're still going in there and you're like lifting that weight. And for us, that's why even though we went remote and all that, like we always made it a point to have an office, and it's just it makes the biggest difference to just show up, physically open your laptop, just sit there, even though it's like a terrible day, your revenue's down, you're like people are kind of like like leaving the company, whatever, just to be able to show up and sit there and kind of like be near somebody else that's also showing up, like that just goes so far. And again, it compounds. It like the skill of showing up even when you don't want to show up and things are hard is, I feel like, a really underrated skill. And I think there was something on YC that kind of talked about
the power of habit. I mean, I'm a big believer in that for sure, right? And I think that businesses aren't built in a day, and businesses aren't built on the back of one really good day. And I don't know. I look at a lot of people who I admire in the business world, and they're people who, above all else, have a lot of perseverance. Right?
I mean, look at any big company you could think of, the amount of times their stock price crashed or the amount of times that they had to go through layoffs.
It's actually not
Yeah.
majority good.
Yeah,
Like-
it's literally all bad for the most part. And then you get
So-
these glimpses, but then if you zoom out long enough, right, there is this like wobbly line that ends
Yeah.
up going.
And
But
it's
everyone
all-
listeing, start a company.
Yeah.
do it. Yeah. If
But it is so
You're a
worth it.
masochist.
Yeah.
This might be for you.
Yeah.
What's next for Lawtrades? Where are you guys hoping the business is going to go? I mean, you don't have a crystal ball, but where do you want to see it grow over the course of the next year, a couple of years, something like that?
I think for me, my number one priority is making sure it's still a fun and enjoyable experience, just very broadly speaking, that I don't like hate what we're doing. So I think like fun is a really big component to the longevity aspect of it, where it comes naturally. You're working with great people, you're solving problems, you're sitting very closely to your users. More kind of on the technical side, I think it is, sustainably growing. I think we now that we're profitable, we want to stay there and we want to grow within the bounds of that profitability. I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff on the AI side that's happening, as probably many companies are working on already right now. We're using it in a lot of cool ways, both from like automating the process of creating a job description, using a prompt, to matching you with AI and using way more, better data sets to eventually, start automating a lot of different admin workflows via AI agents. So I think that we're kind of like at this sort of, phase where like, we kind of like conquered this mountain, so to speak, of like getting companies comfortable with using freelancers. And that was the big idea. Like 10 years from now, like there's going to be more freelancers than full-time employees. And we want to get people excited about hiring freelancers. And I think like the next phase of it is, how do we sort of augment freelancers with AI agents and almost like build out a marketplace around that idea, whether it is augmenting the freelancers and giving them 10x, 100x more leverage to work with more clients with keeping their cost structure roughly the same, or even, starting almost like a separate marketplace of AI agents that are trained by our freelancers that you can hire and you can review, and they're very good at certain tasks and you pay per task. So I think it's very exciting. I think the future is the part I'm like most optimistic about. I don't think I've been this optimistic about 2025 or a particular year than as far as I can remember. But it's cool. But at the end of the day, keeping it simple, sticking to the basics, like not deviating too much from the core path. I think that we've sort of went through a lot of those changes, and I think we've found our footing. But yeah, like taking a couple of big swings, but more or less keep everything else like roughly the same and like sticking to the playbook.
Yeah,
so
we
to
have
speak.
big growth plans. We obviously want to execute really well next year. We're looking to make a few key hires. So if anyone's interested in checking us out, we are hiring for several roles.
Sweet.
But yeah, next year is really just about a continuation in a lot of ways of like what we've been doing for like the past 18 months.
I've got a few fun questions for you guys that I like to ask guests as we
Fun round.
close the
This is
fun
the
round.
rapid fire
This is the
one?
rapid fire
Okay.
fun round. Yeah. Okay. Your favorite part of your day to day?
Oh, I mean, I really still enjoy the whole sales process, and I love talking to customers. Like, that's probably what I like enjoying the most. So
Sweet.
Even, working hand in hand with our sales team, meeting all these new folks, learning about their problems, helping them solve them. That's by far my favorite part. And, making those connections with them.
Yeah, I would say I really enjoy our coffee walks.
That's a good one.
There's just something about walking and the
Yeah.
way that first coffee just hits, like the first one in the morning, and you combine walking with coffee with like ideas, like, and you have an iPhone, like you're unstoppable.
Yeah.
like there's literally nothing you can't conquer.
How long do you set
that's a
aside
great
for
one.
those every day?
It's like 15 minutes.
15 minutes. We just take
There's
the
a-
same walk to Starbucks, go
Yep.
outside.
2 coffees and a pup cup for his dog.
Yeah, my dog's in
I'm
the
sure the
office,
coffee
so-
pays for itself. The ideas you guys come
Oh
up with.
man,
Yeah.
the
over the-
ROI
yeah.
on those coffee. In the beginning, we were
Yeah.
just kind of like, it's getting kind of expensive.
Yeah, yeah.
But like we had, I mean, countless ideas,
Yeah.
countless like
Yeah.
big ideas, small like euphoric like moments where things just kind of came together, and all thanks to Starbucks. Thank you, Howard.
Our best ideas come from like those times outside the office, right? Whether you're grabbing dinner or grabbing a bite to eat, whatever it is. Yeah.
Okay. the opposite. Do you have a professional pet peeve?
Oh, I mean, I know what Rod's is gonna be, but I'll mine.
Yes, this should be like kind of like a founder dating show.
Mine overall is just like pointless meetings. Like if it could be solved on a Slack message, I'd always take that route any day. But I would guess Rod's is when we don't use Notion.
Yeah, I am a big async, document everything. Because I know inevitably every piece of data we create right now is going to be searchable with AI and it's almost kind of like the more you write, the more of your company brand you're able to like leave behind and then kind of pass that on to like future generations, future people. So like nobody still uses Notion. No, I think you guys are getting better. It's just the sales team. All the engineers, everyone's there. The sales team will still just kind of just be
like, what's Notion?
Yeah, they won't sort of do that. But along with that, I would say like my biggest pet peeve probably is not being very direct in communicating. So just when you're not like concise, when you're not direct, when you're not just like matter of fact, it really just kind of like bugs me because I'm just like, just say what you want. And there should be no fear. And this is kind of like, it's the best idea wins. So like you don't need to filter out anything. And I want to be challenged. And that maybe that's like the second part of it is like, if I don't get challenged enough and if it feels like I'm the one that's always coming up with the ideas and guiding it and nobody's pushing back, that also makes it very unsettling because, it's not like
you might be wrong.
I'm majority of the time wrong, and I don't think I'm the smartest person in any particular field. So during meetings, that's why I try to make a point to go last because I don't want to like influence somebody else's thing or tell me what you think I want to hear. So when there's not enough pushback and it's not direct enough, that really just bugs me.
I like to read a lot. I like to ask guests on the pod if they have a book that they'd recommend to our audience. I mean, it can be a business book, but it certainly doesn't have to be. It could also be a fun book to read on the airplane or by the beach next summer or something like that.
I would say my favorite books are all business books, but I would probably go with Shoe Dog. I thought that book was incredible, and just to hear like how vulnerable Phil Knight was in that book and, everything Nike had to go through to be the company they are now, it just, always reinforces that like there's no linear path straight to the top. Like the best companies out there, like we mentioned earlier, have like gone through so many ups and downs and have battled adversity in so many different ways. And it was just such a refreshing look to, hear that story from like an iconic American company. So that's probably mine.
Yeah, I'll give you 3.
Cool.
So
overachiever.
I know, right? One book I'm still in the process of finishing is around AI. This book called Nexus by Yuval Harari.
Okay.
He wrote the book. What is it?
Yes.
Sapiens.
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 That's right.
And it's a really good take around like the pros and cons of AI like 20, 30 years from now, like the impacts of that in like a totalitarian government system and like what trusting AI over everything else can actually like lead to, both from positives and negatives, maybe leaning a little bit more towards the negatives, kind of becoming this new sort of godlike figure for people and what that could look like a few years down the road. So if you're into AI, it's a great book, very, very well written. On the business side or investing side, my wife got me this book called the Tao of Warren Buffett, the New Tao of Warren Buffett.
Okay.
So they're just these like really short, like one-pager wisdom bombs by Warren Buffett that you can kind of read in any order. You just leave it on your coffee table, you pick it open, and it's one of his quotes at the top of the page, and then I believe his daughters write like kind of an explanation for his like thinking for said quote. So really great business advice, really good investing advice, and just kind of timeless wisdom. So on the business side, I like that. And then the third book, I'm really into like kind of like the also like spiritual stuff, like ego-based sort of thinking. anything that this author, his name is Jed McKenna, writes is incredible. It will sort of change your worldview. It will change your belief systems. It will change how you sort of just operate on a day-to-day basis. Just really questioning a lot of the beliefs and assumptions you've sort of made, either for yourself or just kind of like got molded by society to sort of think a certain way. And yeah, on the spiritual side, anything that Jed McKenna writes is absolutely life-changing.
Cool. My final question for the two of you, this is my traditional closing question with my guests. It's if you could look back on your days of being a young lawyer, and this could be for the two of you in law school or maybe when you were just getting started with Lawtrades, one thing that you know now that you wish that you'd known back then.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I would say from a business perspective, probably stay patient. Like I was super overeager to get this thing to work around that time when we were in law school. So, staying patient, having a super long-term view on your future career and like what you're working on would have been super valuable to hear. And of course, we did but we spent maybe 3 or 4 years working on, certain customer segments within Lawtrades that probably weren't the best customer segments. So, of course, I wish we would have just started with enterprise from the get-go. But it was
all the memories.
Yeah, exactly.
All the memories we had of going door to door selling the ZocDoc for lawyers.
Yeah.
We would have had that.
We literally were doing that.
So for lawyers. That's good. I like that.
Yeah. That was literally the pitch. That was Lawtrades V1.
Yeah. So I would say that for me.
Yeah. I think definitely be kinder, to myself during the journey. Don't be like so hard on yourself, especially kind of, all the rejections and pain you're inevitably going to sort of experience. Just sort of like, being a little bit more neutral towards that and not kind of blaming yourself as much. And maybe, the second one is kind of along the lines of what Ashish said, but viewing it as a journey, not just like I need to get to X point to be happy. It's like I think a lot of times when you're a founder, you're on this like, hedonic treadmill of like, if only we can get to $1 million in revenue per year, we'll be happy. And we get to $1 million. It's like, well, if only we can get to like 5, that's it. Then we're all good. Then we get to like 5.
The amount of times we did that, it's so funny.
And it's like, and we try to catch ourselves out. It's like we get to like 12. Like, only we can get to 20. But like, shut up. Zip it. So it's just like I think just like knowing that, the inevitable outcome, which is like revenue growth and, value we create. And revenue is important, but it's like, like we're creating a ton of value for our workers and our freelancers on the platform. And that's often something we revisit all the time. Like we're putting millions of dollars into the pockets of internet strangers. And just like that's incredible to be able to like have that type of impact and like, let that be your legacy, so to speak. But just not getting off on that treadmill and knowing that if you do good work, the bottom line will kind of like take care of itself. It's kind of like a little bit of a riff of the Steve Jobs quote, but like you do good work, you show up, you hire great people, you deliver great value, you respond to emails quickly or Slack messages quickly or text messages quickly, like 90% of the problems could be resolved by just responding quickly, then like we'll be good, know? And I think that's one of our quotes that we sort of like
we'll be good, man.
We'll be good, man.
We'll be good, man.
And no matter what, good, bad, ugly, it always just ends, we'll be good, man. Like,
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, Raad and Ashish, thank you so much for joining me for this episode of The Abstract. You guys have been really thoughtful, not surprising, and this has been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Tyler.
Thanks. It was
Super
great to
fun.
do this. Yeah.
And to all of our listeners, thanks so much for tuning in, and we hope to see you next time.
Bye-bye.